This is a coping mechanism podcast.
This is a coping mechanism podcast.
This is a coping mechanism podcast. Hello and welcome to This is a Coping Mechanism podcast. I am one of your hosts, Bessie. With me as always is my wonderful co-host and friend,
George. No, I'm Ted.
I'm recording, so...
Are you serious? Why do you do this?
I've always wanted to sneak in and do in the beginning of the intro first.
I'm keeping it.
So this is as always my wonderful friend and co-host.
I'm Ted. I don't say the other part, so I don't know it. You guys know I do the other one. Thank you for coping with us. Enjoy coping with us through music
or movies.
I swear I'm good at this. Well, listen to the other one.
Join us
as we cope through things.
This satire
life of ours
with
movies, media, mysteries, and more. Music isn't a part of it, even though I said it multiple times. I listen to music.
Okay, what a fun intro.
Can't stop listening to this Chapel Roan. She seems like a good egg.
She does.
If you like music, check out this Chapel Roan. She's got songs.
Period. Alright, guys.
I like them. I do feel kind of funny at the gym because, like,
You're just blasting it in your ear.
Yeah, I'm like.
Me too. Pink panic.
Yeah, I was on the elliptical, and I was listening to Hot to Go.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, and I was literally like, oh, and then I opened my eyes, and there was like a old woman, like old, standing in front of me, just like,
what the fuck are you doing? You're like, you bitch can take me hot to go.
Yeah, and I was just like, hey, and she was just like, and then turned around, and I was like, I don't know if you senile or you just what's wrong with you.
As bizarre as she probably thought that was, we're gonna get into some bizarre facts, y'all. And bizarre facts, that's not what this is about at all.
That's not at all the topic of this episode.
Bizarre laws.
This is what you get for flip-flopping.
Honestly, this is what I get. So bear with us.
You made me look like an idiot.
Well, now look at me.
Internet.
Look at me. So I thought it'd be fun to just do a little thing of an episode about laws. It's easy. It was fun, simple, but like, as we all know, the laws look like they're coming to some changes, and that just made me think.
It'd be wild out there, yo.
Yeah, that just made me think. What are, like, some old, bizarre rules and laws that, one, either were a thing, still are because no one's taken the time to, like, repeal them because they're not needed for the times anymore, and even just, like, kind of how rules and laws started?
Like the collection of horse droppings in city limits.
Exactly. So, like, obviously early societies created codes to, like, govern society, even before, like, writing existed. So, like, the desire for law was just to keep order within, you know, our natural human traits to do whatever the fuck we want.
Right? To be like, hey, that's cool shit. I want that shit.
I'm gonna take it.
I'm gonna take it. And then the other person being like, no, it's my shit. If you try that, I'll kill you. And then, like...
You're like, well, that might be a little severe, but maybe a little punishment in some sort.
Yeah.
So again, it seems like laws have always in societies been created before even like writing. But around like 2100 BCE is where they first started kind of finding like some codes of law, which started off with like penalties for crime, like murders and robberies, and then fines of punishments instead of like all this like physical retribution for things. And then we had like the 1930 BCE covered issues like property disputes, marriage, inheritance. We had 1754 BCE based on the principle of Lex Talionis. Italianus is what we're gonna go with. Which is the law of retaliation, kind of known for an eye for an eye.
Oh, yeah,
So
I know this one.
I kind of like that idea. I know it could probably be extreme, but I kind of feel like that probably worked in a lot of ways.
Right? They're like, hey, if you hit someone,
Yeah, he's
we're
gonna fucking hit you back.
Yeah. If you take their thing, we're gonna take your thing and give it to him.
Yeah, you chopped off his arm, you get your arm chopped off.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Broke his finger, bam.
Your finger's broken. Now you know what it feels like.
Yeah, it's like, okay, will you ever do this again? No, because you know if you get caught,
it'll be happened to you.
you're fucked.
Well, that's what I always think of, like, if that was still kind of a thing, like I think they did eye for an eye for some, like, that principle, or even things that weren't, like, physical to somebody else. But, like, yeah, if you, like, hurt or rape somebody, would you do it if you knew that was just gonna happen right back to you if you got caught? Probably fucking not.
I think that's still in a lot of well, not in a lot, in a way, kind of how our society kind of goes through stuff now. Like if you murder someone, that's always been the debate of the death penalty.
Right. Do you deserve to die?
Yeah. Do you deserve to die? If you kill someone, that's eye for an eye. It's like,
right.
Okay, you killed people, we're gonna kill you.
Right.
And
in a sense, it makes sense.
Or like reparations for, now we don't like cane someone if they if they beat someone, but they're like, all right,
you're gonna them.
you're gonna pay
for it. And yeah, so then we even got to the point of, like, in Rome where it was like legal transparency for all citizens to have, like, legal rights, which again we're seeing some things change now. But it's always been like these early laws laid a foundation for kind of like our modern laws today.
I can't remember what society it was, but I was looking at some history thing, and I was like going down a rabbit hole of looking at some society, and it was like different class systems. You had access to different aspects of law and
that
government and representation.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, if you're good enough, you can go to court.
Sure.
And you have to be a certain level of standing in society in order to have the right for what did you say, law transparency for all citizens?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you had to earn that, but
which is crazy. Which sometimes even like today feels like it's a privilege to like hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
Like, yes, like my dad just went to jail. My mom wasn't paying for a lawyer, but you get a public defender.
Public defender.
Doesn't mean they're great. Doesn't mean you'll get a good deal. Doesn't mean they really give a shit about you, or they're just so overworked that they can't really give you their all. So you're not gonna get a good outcome compared to these people that can like buy their way into those things.
What I think is crazy is just like the level, like you said, of paying for a lawyer,
which is so expensive.
It's so expensive, but the level of like legal carry, because I have a buddy, or rather, I have a buddy whose brother was going through a custody dispute.
Oh yeah.
Where his
those can get ugly.
Not to go into like crazy detail, but his significant other has been, it turns out, she was incredibly abusive to him and a child, and apparently she had all of these like documented mental issues that they didn't know about because she didn't, but she was supposed to like take medication in it, but it all culminated into this big blow up of stuff I'm not going to talk about. But it turned into them being like, she kidnapped the kid.
Oh shit.
And it was a huge thing, all crazy, and then they were like, they called the police, and they were like, turn it, and they were like, okay, unless a lawyer does something, we can.
Yep.
And they were like, what do you mean?
We
have all of this.
Pretty much,
we have all of this evidence that she's unstable and
not safe,
causing harm, and it's not safe for us or the child. And they were like, you understand?
Sucks us up.
Can't do anything.
I
And
know.
then
What if we? I mean, it feels like we've always had a flawed system with how we handle these things, or even how much grace we give people that don't deserve it,
right?
or any of those things. But especially stuff like that.
Yeah, they all had to like pull money together, and then they got a lawyer, and it was done in like less than a day.
Yep.
Boom, and it was like, oh, it's seeing that I was like, oh my god, you know, because I've never anything like that to deal with, but I was like, how is it that there's just, it's like one step,
Yeah.
and you can deal with so much.
Yeah, or you can get away
Yeah.
with so much. Or you can just be shitty for the sake of making someone drag it out so they have to pay more money, and it fucks them in the end.
Right? And it's like, oh yeah, you're not gonna do anything because I can afford a lawyer.
Exactly.
Even if I can afford a not great lawyer, it's more than you, which means I'm gonna win.
Exactly. And I just feel like I read this book once. Well, I read this book, and it was called Talking to Strangers.
I read a book, not to brag.
One time.
It had pages and everything.
Not many. But it was called Talking with Strangers. And it kind of gave this idea, like, as humanity and humans, we don't like kind of trust our gut enough, and we like kind of feel bad for people, and we like give them all these second chances even though they've given you a million red flags. And so they made this kind of scenario about how some people like the idea of like judges and stuff maybe being like AI, because they're almost just matter of fact.
Yeah.
And then there wouldn't be so many, like, in my opinion, and some others, and like the way they put it in the book, of the two perspectives of a young 19-year-old college dude rapes a girl. They bring him into court. His lawyer is going to be like, it was a mistake. He's so young. He has so much to live for.
Yeah, he has so much potential for
blah,
society.
blah, blah. And then they let him go. And then usually they just repeat these offenses. Where it's just like, yeah, if we just had like an AI type thing, again, you'd have to like program it through like humans doing that. But it was still like the idea of it would just be matter of fact. Like, oh, you committed this crime, you go to jail. And I like that idea that we don't trust our gut enough, or we start to feel bad for people even though they do these heinous things. And you're just like, no, you're not allowed to get out in 10 years after doing that. You know? But people are just gonna feel bad, and you really want to think someone's gonna do better, even though they've shown you they're not going to.
You know,
so like these laws don't always, like, it's not always gonna work, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this. You know, like I went to college for criminal justice and a degree, and we talked about this a lot in, I think it was like ethics of policing. Okay. And the whole idea was that it was that exact same discussion. Then they talked about how, I remember my professor being like, you guys had the experience where you're driving, you know, you get off work late, maybe you had to work nights or something like that, and you're tired, you're out of it, and you accidentally, meaning cop pulls you, and you know, they're like doing a sobriety test or whatever, and they're like, don't care, we're bringing you in. And it's like, if you, and then like, whether you were drunk or not, you're not doing this, we're bringing you in, you're not safe. And then you're like, you would hate that. You didn't do anything wrong, you're you know, and something like that. And it's like, okay, well, now what if it is a person, maybe they had been drinking, and that DUI kills someone? It's like, this is that. I remember he's like, that's the level of discretion that is the human factor of laws. That you know that we can't, laws can't account for human circumstance.
That's true, yeah.
And, you know,
It's also shitty that there have been these laws that are so cruel, like slavery, segregation stuff, Jewish citizens being stripped of all their rights, burning witches at the stake for like probably things like sewing, I don't know, dumb shit. There's Chinese death by 1,000 cuts, which was like torture, the draconian laws, which were infamously severe punishments for like even like petty crimes of like theft, and it was like death. And so you're just like, we're not making these good laws that like
yeah, it's, you can see that in like even more modern stuff of like, the Chinese birth limit laws,
Yeah.
and and sex orientation of the child, and even like now with all of these to me very transphobic laws that are in identification that are, I mean, you're talking about
right
Jewish identification laws and all this stuff, and it's like they're kind of doing that with trans people right now. Like, I'm no historian,
to marry
but
somebody, like it's crazy.
And again, going into that idea of like, just because something's a law, that make it right?
Does it make it right?
No, as we talked about before, just like horse dropping accumulation in city limits, what is right is wrong.
Right, and it's all perspective. So that's why it's hard to put an umbrella or a blanket over these laws when everyone doesn't feel the same way about that, which I get. That's why you vote and do all these things, but in the end, it's still not ever going to be equal across the board. There will be the low, there'll be the high, there'll be the extreme of either side, and we've never in society have ever in any recorded history been able to all be on the same page. You know what I'm saying? There was always the rich, there was always the poor, there was always, you can afford this, that, and that. So it's kind of like, I get getting upset about it, and when you should be, but I feel like we also have to be so realistic on like, when has it ever been like that for people?
Yeah.
It never has. So like, you can't think just because it's later now in our generations that like, this is probably better than where most have been, even though some things will still be shitty.
Yeah, I think it's like, strive for ideals, but plan for reality.
Right.
And it's like
that part.
And it was like 2 episodes back we were talking about the Luigi Mangione thing.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I like to me, an ideal is that no human should kill another human. Shouldn't ever be necessary today. We're at a point where we don't need to for survival, unless it's like a person is
trying to hurt
and that they're absolutely wrong with them. Even still, like, we have access to so many less than lethal things that it's like,
that's true.
You can take a lot of steps to put someone down and not kill them.
That's true.
And again, this is all an ideal.
Yes.
Real life, practically,
none of that.
That's not really the way things work out, unfortunately.
Ever,
And
I always try to, like, again, like how we talked about in the last episode, of just like, complaining about certain things, and I think everyone should and express themselves in that, what they're concerned of. But sometimes, like, did you watch the new show on Netflix, American Primeval?
I don't think so.
It was like a Western. It was like in the 1850s.
No. And
I don't watch a lot of stuff like that, but I just thought, damn, I'm glad I was not born in that time. Or I always think like, damn, I'm glad I wasn't born in like the medieval period, where that was like some of the most brutal and creative methods of hurting each other, and I was just like, no fucking way. Like, even though right now is maybe not everything we want, but I'm still
probably the best.
Yeah, I'm
time
still
to be
really
alive.
glad I was not ever a part of those other times.
I was watching something, and it was like, it was a college history professor talking to like a nerd. And he was just like, what would you what era would you ever want to live? And he's just like, medieval times, Arthurian nice. And he's like, oh, so you want to live until 35?
Yeah.
You wanna only bathe once a month if you're
If
rich?
that, yeah.
You want to, you want to be exposed to this disease, it's like, oh, no, I don't want any of that. And it's
No.
like, yeah, you want, and it's like Old West, and
No.
same thing. It's when you
might
take
think
off-
this idea of cowboys and Indians and
it's
having a gun,
romanticized.
having a gunfight in a bar, but like, no. Being a woman, especially, no.
Hell no.
Hell no. Or you'd get like your fucking eye plucked out for like gossiping.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, you don't allow me to work. What the fuck else am I supposed to do?
Like-
Gossip.
Have y'all ever actually seen a spittoon full of dipspit? Do you know the smell it gives in Texas heat and how much it burns the nostrils? Imagine that around a bunch of dudes who don't ever wash,
Don't ever wash.
don't ever clean, and you say something wrong. You're lucky just your eye get popped out. I tell you what.
What?
For real though, it's
No,
nasty.
for real. No. And like I wrote down some of these crazy torture methods from the medieval times, but I really hope when we go back to Germany, in North Germany, there's a museum called the Medieval Crimes Museum, where they have like displays and explaining during the medieval times what they were like doing to each other. And I don't know what was in the water that I couldn't even think of these ways to like hurt somebody, you know? So like the rack, where a prisoner was tied to a wooden frame and stretched until their joints dislocated and then their limbs just tore apart. Why? For what? Why would you, how could you think of that?
You don't understand. They looked at a rich person.
Literally.
Obviously. And you gotta understand the advancements in humanitarianism they used to do that with horses. Now,
Yeah.
animal cruelty, we just do it with a rack. It's really about the advancement of technology.
That's true. Or like the pair of anguish, where a metal device was either inserted. Oh, the metal device inserted into the mouth, the rectum, vagina, and then expanded, cause excruciating pain and internal damage that would eventually kill you.
I have seen that.
That's just crazy. The Judas cradle, victims were lowered onto a pyramid-shaped spike, which would slowly impale you. The iron chair, a chair covered in spikes, victims were strapped in, sometimes with fire heat beneath them. Like, what the fuck is wrong with us as people? What are we doing to each other? Like, I could genuinely tell you, I think if anyone ever deserved any death like that, it's because you, like, tortured and hurt somebody or a kid or an animal or something.
And even then, I don't think
Like, it's really necessary.
that's justified in any sense. It's like,
They just
all right,
need
you
to
did
be
that?
dead.
Yeah, it's just like,
Eek.
all right. And
Yeah, you're not worth all that time and effort.
Right, it's like, okay, if you think that if you doing that was okay
Right.
and that you would do that, it's like, all right, then you just can't exist,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Again, I'd like the ideal of, no, we can help you and you can do better.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, I don't know. And obviously, I'm not saying that for like everything.
No,
Again,
but
we're this humans, and these are like broad strokes.
yeah.
But there have been like genuinely demented and evil, horrific people.
Oh yeah.
Who was like the Jeffrey Dahmer guy who was like a cannibal, and
Yeah.
Gacy the clown. It's like, all right, you just can't exist.
Yeah. You just die.
You just can't exist anymore. You know, you being in the world makes it
Not good.
so much worse and dangerous that
Yeah.
it's like, all right, you just can't be around.
I do wonder sometimes, like, that idea of, like, if people are born evil or if they're, like, made evil or if
Nature
it's,
versus
like...
nurture.
Yeah, exactly.
I went to college.
I did not. But, like, do you think...
This is the most I've ever used any of that education.
You're welcome.
And I didn't even know where it was today.
But, like, do you think like maybe people of that time making up these ways to hurt each other. Like, do you think that's passed down genetically?
I think,
Or like, was that just a way people were coping back in the day for whatever? Like, I don't even know.
I think to me,
Yeah.
and you'll forgive me out there watching, the whole shtick of the Dark Ages and all that stuff was that we had this regression from science and advancement, and we sought comfort in religion, and a lot of religious leaders at the time were
fear.
instill fear in a lot of the aspects of the Bible are, you know, especially Old Testament stuff, more vengeance focus and wrath.
Right.
And they're like, okay, you know, we're trying to put back the pieces of this broken world after Black Plague and all that. That the easiest way to do that is through fear and
lots of it.
and what's the word? Like pushing people down.
Like suppressing?
Yeah, subjugation.
Yeah.
And they're like, we have to do that in order to survive. So we are going to emulate this aspect of what we feel is from this book of wrath and pain and suffering, and through that pain and suffering comes you know, religious epiphany or forgiveness or whatever you want to call it. And it's like, okay. And you know, that was the whole thing with like the witch trials. It was like, all right, we'll burn them and that'll kill the demon and we'll save their souls. And they may die, but their souls will be fine.
Souls are saved.
And it's like, okay, we understand you stole that loaf of bread. You know what? God forgives you. And to prove your forgiveness, we're going to cut your hands off so you can never do it again. And through your suffering,
you'll learn.
You will find faith in God. And it's like, okay.
You'll find your salvation.
Yeah, you'll find salvation through suffering.
Wow.
And then, now we have this idea of salvation through suffering. The more you suffer, more trials and tribulations that you're put through by God,
right,
the more holier you become. Now what? Now we have to advance suffering, because the more you suffer, the more devout you can become.
Wow.
Now let's advance suffering. And, you know, what do we do then? We make weird button penis umbrellas that kill you. And
it's like that movie, that French from Martyrer, where
never heard of it.
It's pretty fucked up. Don't watch it.
Thank you. I will not. If you tell me not to watch it,
don't watch it.
I will not do that.
But a lot of it was focused on, they took these spoilers for Martyrs, the French film, if you haven't seen it. But there was like this secret society where they, you know, wanted to kind of get to the place of that in between like life and death, and like finding people who had already like suffered in life. And like you said, making them kind of suffer more for like true salvation so they can get to the other side. And of course, they went a horrible, fucked up way about it by like flaying people alive. And if you survived the flaying, you were like special. So now that you kind of like ran that all down of maybe like your perspective of where it could come from, I'm like, oh, that I could see why they maybe were doing that then.
Yeah.
Not, again, it makes a little more sense of like how they came up. Like, why do we need to come up with these crazy things? But yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
You also get, and then this thing is, you know, finding the people who they're like, oh, they're the ones who'll do this. I've never seen Hellraiser, but I imagine it's those Cenobite motherfuckers who, you know, are like, yeah, you derive
pain is pleasure.
Yeah, as joy from suffering, whether that be from others or yourself. And it's like, yeah, we'll get these, you know, not to yuck anyone's yum, listen to our past episode.
Yeah.
But if I'm sure they get the real wackadoos, and they're like, hey, we understand you're real wacky.
Little oddball.
You think you can make us some good suffering stuff for that we can help people? And they're like, yes!
Literally. But do you think people are just born that way also? Like, do you think that can happen? Or do you think nobody's born like that fucked up to like come up with these horrendous things they either do to other people or like
I think first, I think yes and no.
okay.
I think that now we're able to now they've like done brain scans, and they've have history of brain scans of
Yeah.
people who have like violent tendencies and aggression and maybe more sadistic sides, and then now we have like cataloged information of some of them from when they were children up until adults,
Right.
and there's like measurable, quantifiable differences in their brains,
Right.
and those differences can't all be chalked up to, childhood experiences,
Right.
especially for some who they've shown are like, oh, their parents sought help.
Right.
And we have all of this medical information that shows, no, there's just,
Like something's
there's an imbalance,
unbalanced.
there's a
Yeah.
difference, a developmental issue.
Yeah.
So I think that there can be people who are born, bad.
Yeah.
But I think that those instances are rare.
Sure.
And I think more often than not, it is nurture.
Yeah, for sure.
And nature will always play a part.
Yeah.
But it's like, you think about it, for aggression, for a lot of people, could just be survival.
Yeah.
Like, we've needed to be aggressive in order to survive. So like, oh, what if someone's born who has, like something happened during development, and it's, oh, those primal aggressions
Yeah.
were just
Kinda
that part of the
triggered, yeah.
brain grew more, something that has been deep seated
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
And on these people, it's just, it happens to grow a little bit more. All right, in today's society, that don't fly.
Yeah.
A couple thousand years ago,
Right.
they would have been running the show,
Yeah.
keeping everyone alive.
Yeah.
And
I always wonder. Obviously, I only know like so much about my like dad's childhood. And maybe though that he was like, even though he was taken care of, maybe like financially, I don't think he was emotionally, which makes a big difference. But my dad got encephalitis, which is an infection in the brain, when he was like before he was 10. And so I always wonder if something in that infection like really altered his brain. And then anything that happened after that in his childhood, it was just like exacerbated to make him just like fucked up,
yeah.
And I always asked my grandma, why didn't you take him to therapy? Like, you knew he took him to the doctor for the brain infection. Why didn't you like get him therapy when you saw he was acting out after that? And her answer was, well, that would have made the family name look bad. And I said, well, what did it do now after all the heinous things he's done? Made it look bad, you stupid bitch.
You're like, guess what? Now our name don't mean shit.
Exactly. And it ends with me, So ran in the family till it ran into me.
Right?
But I always think about that, for him. Like, what happened in your brain? What can infections or being predispositioned to something like just be triggered, and you're now this completely different person, and like you said, running shit back in the day because you're just so evil and you're so cruel, and people are scared of you that they just listen, that we make these laws, and then we see that now that people are just power hungry, and there's a certain stereotype of people who are power hungry and what that looks like and how they put down other people for control for the masses of us, in 2025. It's kind of crazy.
And it's,
again, it's still better than what it probably ever was, but it's still crazy to see it happening right now and how it affects people and groups of people.
yeah, it feels really weird as being someone who would be ultimately unaffected
Right.
by a lot of this stuff, but
Yeah.
I know and have so many people
Yeah.
in these groups, and it's, I'm like, I have friends who are genuinely scared about continuing to live
Yeah.
in Texas.
As themselves.
Yeah, and they're like, I want to move,
Mhm.
leave. Like, this shit could get dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, Maybe you should.
Yeah, if you can.
I don't want you to, but maybe you should.
Yeah.
And it's like, and as you know,
But I think that's the problem. I think probably all in like societies of these things, because people separate themselves so much from people who aren't like them or like-minded, that they create that rift of,
yeah,
like you said, when you had never like met a gay person before, you were like genuinely like, oh fuck. But once you figured out like, oh, this person's like really nice and a good person, maybe what I've been taught of what these people are like is like wrong. Like that
Yeah.
perception is wrong, and it's not that at all. I think that's what we need more now than ever, to show us that there's a lot more we have in common together. If you just kind of were willing to be like, yo, let's talk about it, you know, instead of the
Yeah.
stereotype taking control and running with it on fire off a building into a fucking volcano.
Personally, I believe that the more, people in power can make us hate each other,
Yeah.
we won't look at them and be like, what the fuck are you doing?
That's what I think. There's more of us
Yeah.
than them, the common man.
And it's like, if we can pin
Mm-hmm.
the straights against the gays, the men against the women, everyone against the trans, the more groups that we can
Isolate, yeah.
have them pointing at each
Yeah.
other, they're not going to point at us. And I'm like,
I know, it's tough. It's really tough, and
I remember I changed my way of thinking a lot about this, talking to my grandpa,
yeah.
because my grandpa is very old and he is very religious. Him and my nana were the most accepting, gracious people ever. And
Yeah.
she unfortunately passed away a long time ago, but he is not. And every time he's always a little weird about saying I love you, just 'cause
Sure.
he's a lot older. But what he does say, really weird,
Okay.
is he'll be like, survive.
Survive.
And he talks about survival. And it took me a while. And I remember I went up to visit him and I was like, hey, why do you always
Say that.
say that? You're like getting off the phone. And it's because, he grew up
In
In a-
survival
in a time.
mode. Yeah.
And the point was to survive.
Yeah. You're
And
not living, you're just surviving.
Yeah, and he was just like, and he's like, I know it's hard, and he's like, I know it's hard out there, y'all, and and that's what I think you should be focused on, and I think focus on, right? And I want you to survive. To
Like,
him,
get out of it, yeah.
that's
Get
the most
through it.
important thing. So that's him saying, you mean the most because I want you to survive.
Yeah.
And it made me think, oh, everyone out here, now we're kind of getting back to that mindset of survival.
Yeah.
And I have more in common with people who are just trying to survive
Yeah.
than I do with any, rich highfalutin mother flipper.
Exactly.
And it's like,
Exactly.
I don't care what you do, as long as you're not hurting
Actively
people
hurting people.
without consent.
That part.
Yeah, then, and you're not causing any. Yeah, we're just surviving.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
true.
like, cool. Do you survive?
Yeah.
I hope, I don't think you should deal with all this bullshit. I think you should just focus
Be
on
able to live.
yeah, be
and
able to
survive.
live and survive. Happiness. You got to work towards that. I think you should survive.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. No, it's definitely like an interesting time we're in, and with all these new laws that may or may not be happening or changing, let's talk about some laws that have not changed because someone is not taking the time to just repeal it.
Right.
And they just are so funny and kind of funky that you're just like, how is that even ever put into it in the first place?
I know. So, full disclosure for those out there, we talked about this, during one of our
Little meetings.
little meetings about topic discussions. I didn't know we were going to be doing this was on today's ballot. So there's a couple that I know off the top of my head. Again, I went to college, but I didn't actually look up very many. It's very unprofessional on my part.
No.
Please continue.
Well, let me hear the ones you have.
So I know that it's illegal to fart in an enclosed space in Texas if you're in a public enclosed space.
Again, we'll preface this by saying when I was looking at all of these, some of them are still laws like that, let's say. They are so old that like no one's really like actively pursuing them. So like
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Obviously when we're having fun with these just ones, that no one is really going to be actively pursuing these as you breaking the law.
So that's the thing, is that laws can exist, but without a defined parameter of punishment for a law, it's unenforceable. So if something's illegal, but there's no defined set of repercussion, you can't enforce it. So for instance...
Right, because you could say, you broke the law, okay.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, well...
And it's like... Yeah, and it's like, okay... And it's like, oh, if you fart in an elevator in Texas, technically you just committed a misdemeanor. And
I be crop dusting people all the time.
Doing it
in
right now.
Small places.
Right. Not. But I know that one. I made jokes about it before, but because there is in Texas. Because a lot of this for a long time has been like horse country.
Yeah.
And manure was a rather expensive trade, and horse manure a lot more nutrient rich than cow manure.
Okay.
For those who didn't know. So there used to be laws governing, because manure they would go through towns and then they would just
like taking it?
Yeah, they would take it. And then they would sell it.
Just taking poop and
they would just take poop, put it in a cart, and then sell it.
Wow.
So they made laws where, because the whole thing was that larger manure sellers, they weren't making as much money. So then they paid to lobby these laws that stopped people from going and collecting
free poop.
free horse manure in town, because they would go into town, fill up a wagon, go back to their farm, and then they wouldn't buy it from the, companies who were selling it. So then they made it illegal that you weren't allowed to do that, and that you had to buy from them. And then it was just like, it was like one of those things.
And then just all that horse manure went to waste on the streets.
But I always thought that was really funny, because I was just man, if that don't ever tell you about the rich paying for for literal shit to get done or not done. These guys were out here cleaning the streets and feeding their families, and they were like, "You're not paying me for that shit. Well, I'm gonna pay someone to make it where we're gonna."
No, literally. You got more?
I know,
Mr. College Man.
There's one where I think it's not in Texas, but it's like in Georgia. It's illegal to eat. It was illegal to drink fruit juice from an open glass container bigger than like a glass. So it was like you couldn't drink fruit juice out of a jug.
Wow, why?
You
know what?
I think because people were fermenting it and then like turning it into alcohol, and then they would be like, and then they were trying to like inhibit alcohol consumption, and they were saying it was fruit juice.
Georgia also it's illegal to have a surprise roadside picnic in Gainesville, Georgia.
What do you mean surprise? You're like going down the road and you're like, that spot looks nice.
Literally. And it says
Get out the cooler, Betty. We're having ourselves a sit down.
And it literally says it exists. This law exists to keep the roads clear and prevent traffic hazards. And I'm just like, what the fuck is that? And who did it that one time?
Right.
That was like, what are you guys doing? Oh, I just had a surprise picnic off the side of the road. Surprise.
That's what I'm saying, because like if something happens once,
Yeah,
I don't see them making a law for
but
it.
it seems like they kind of do. Like, there's one in Arizona. It's illegal to let your donkey sleep in a bathtub because in the 1920s, a rancher's donkey regularly slept in the tub, and one day a flood carried the tub and donkey miles away, leading to an expensive rescue operation. So to prevent further instances, lawmakers banned them sleeping in tubs.
Yeah, that's
Fucking crazy and ridiculous, right?
how are you even gonna control that? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like,
Plus, if a flood comes or something, right, and the donkey gets carried away, wouldn't you still kind of go look for your donkey? You don't know if it was gonna live or not, so you didn't know in its bathtub if it was gonna live or not.
if anything, I'd be like, yes, sleep in. I got my donkey back. If it was just in the flood, it would have died. But that gave it the buoyancy to live.
Exactly. So that shit's crazy. It's illegal in Alabama, Louisiana, Missouri, and a few others to wrestle a bear. Why the fuck people would want to wrestle a bear in the first place? Don't know. But exists because in the past, bear wrestling was a cruel but popular attraction.
I did know that one.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, it was an old.
I'm assuming you would drug the bear, right? Because there's no way
Yes.
anyone's fighting a bear thinking they're really finna win.
Yeah, so circuses would come through town with bear
Mm.
wrestlers, and then they would invite people to be like, "Hey, you want to take on the bear?" And then they would have bets where they would have a guy who would then fight a bear, and
Any person, especially a man, because I've seen this poll online all the time, that thinks in a just straight up like fist fight, no weapons, no animal drugged. There are people out there that think they can win a fight with a bear, a lion, a gorilla.
You are a fucking idiot.
There's no fucking way. There's no way.
You obviously have never seen a real life bear,
Exactly.
but I gotta tell you, it's fucking terrifying.
It's terrifying to see a big ass dog that's like
Not for me.
uncontained and just
grab him by the mouth.
oh yes, you know. Or like when I was a kid in Alaska, moose. They're
Yeah.
huge.
Moose are crazy. They're
And you find them with their babies, just like bears. They're aggressive.
yeah, they're really.
And they're
I know
huge. You think these deers are big here? No,
moose kill more people than bears
are
do.
huge.
If you guys want to learn some serious like shit, go look up how many people die from moose in the north,
Compared to
because
like,
they are incredibly aggressive.
Yeah.
You think because they're cool and deer are nice, they
no,
run away. Moose do not run away. They are big
they
and scary and
charge
mean.
you.
They'll flip your car and beat you to death.
In South Carolina, you are not allowed to make false weather reports, which I thought was funny because I feel like a lot of the time the weather reports seem kind of
Right.
not accurate. Not saying it's purposely false, but it's also like hit or miss.
Right? That's,
So
the
I
whole
was
thing
just
is like,
like-
we think this is gonna happen, but the winds of Mother Earth, man, who fucking knows?
And it said it was made to prevent and stop hoaxes so it wouldn't cause like public panic.
Oh, but still, like,
Exactly. Like, what are you gonna do?
I guess if you, the only thing I can think of is if someone's like running around back like in the olden days, being like, "Tornado! There's a tornado!"
Yeah.
And then
But
everyone
then you'd
being like,
eventually
"Oh,
see there's not a tornado.
Yeah, right.
Like,
and
I
then-
don't feel like the panic and the damage of that would be that bad, but maybe.
It's like we
How
had
many times does a weatherman say, like, a tornado's coming through Texas? But, like, how much of Texas is really affected? You don't see the whole state of Texas freaking the fuck out. You know what I'm saying? Or at least if you live in Louisiana or Florida, when they say there's maybe a hurricane, you best believe there's maybe a hurricane.
we do live in tornado country. I do know.
But you
Here-
know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
it's just people are gonna panic no matter what.
I used to go.
So I thought that was a funny one.
I used to go run outside when I was a kid. Whenever I would see there's gonna be a tornado on the news, I would want to fly in it.
Yeah, people survive and just get thrown out of them.
Yeah. So then I would juke my dad, and then I would run outside during the storm, and then he would just scream, and I remember multiple times just going out in the front yard in like the horrific rain and just go,
Come on, take me, take me.
and it didn't do shit.
Oh, that's hilarious. This one's in Texas, which I thought was really interesting. You cannot shoot a firearm from a moving vehicle unless it's at a whale.
That's pretty cool.
Why it exists is the part about shooting from a moving vehicle is a common gun safety law, but the mention of a whale is strange. Some believe it originated from a federal law or mistakenly copied from a coastal state's regulation, since Texas doesn't have a whale population. Or,
What if,
like, what the fuck do you mean, unless it's a whale?
yeah, like, now I don't know what
And plus,
marine
how are
life.
you accidentally copying other state laws and, like, putting them in yours?
Oh, that happens all the time.
I know, but that's crazy to me. Like, how do you accidentally do that? That seems like no one's really diligently checking.
Oh, I mean,
of
but that's
course
just
not,
true,
but
yeah.
it's still, like, mind-blowing.
it's, you know, it's a lot. I think laws they can be kind of like, they're like updates on phone. They're like,
That's very true, yeah.
they're like, oh, what did they do? This. Run it through.
Run it back.
Did you read it? No one reads those.
No, do I read my iPhone updates new terms and laws? No. I just hope I never turn into one of those South Park episodes where it was do you watch
Human
South? Yes,
Centipede? Yeah.
exactly. I'm just like, please. Every time literally one comes up and it's like, do you agree? I'm like, I pray to whatever may or may not be out there, and I'm like, please don't let this be a South Park episode. And I go, agree.
I used to whenever because
They're so long, and I don't even know if I'd understand half of what it meant.
I didn't know you weren't. I didn't know people didn't.
Yeah,
I
it's
put
just
off,
inconvenient. We should, but we don't.
Yeah, I put off getting a smartphone for like a really long time.
Yeah.
Like everyone in high school had smartphones, and I still had a flip phone.
Yeah,
It was like one of those. I don't need a smartphone. Blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm an old man. I don't need that. And I remember in college, I got my first smartphone. I got an iPhone. It was like an iPhone. It was the cheapest one you could get.
Yeah.
At the time, it was like a 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And I got one of those updates, and I was like, "Oh, a contract.
Let me read.
Let me read it. Wow, they really want you to know a lot of stuff." And I spent like 2 hours being like,
"Yeah, that shit is what it's." So many pages, and it's such small text that they're like squeezing into it.
I think I did that 3 times before I was like, "Alex, why do they keep having you sending you these contracts to read?" And then he made fun of me.
I've heard of like just random laws over the years, but like I just always think about how many laws we probably actually even have in Texas. Like if you looked up like how many legit laws are there, even if they're not enforced or they're old. Like, how many do you think there probably are? Just, like, thousands upon thousands?
Oh, yeah.
And then if someone does something one time, they're like, ooh, new law.
You know what I think is crazy?
I feel like you can't break a law now. Or you can't make a law exist by breaking... How would you word that? I don't think anyone could do something nowadays that would need to make a new law for, because we just have to have... Like, everyone's had to just at least do it by now. Besides maybe like some new AI stuff that hasn't been done yet.
I think,
or
robot I think technology
stuff.
kind of changes a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, I think it's kind of hard to say because things do change, and society changes a lot, and how kind of like I could see laws with school changing dramatically.
Yeah, that's true.
Because of how, you know, I was talking to my niece the other day, and I was asking her about her classes, and the way that they learn a lot different.
That's very true, yeah.
Because it is a lot more, you know, I don't know about you, but I feel like at least where I lived and grew up, it was very anti-technology in the classroom. No teacher, you weren't allowed to, which I didn't understand, because it was like I remember having a laptop.
It's helpful, why not?
Yeah, why couldn't I use my laptop to type?
Right.
Search, or, you know.
I feel like my school's more pushed that. Like, oh, we're going to try to do these projectors, and we're going to try to give you...
Like a more progressive kind of thing?
Tablets. But I don't know if that's just because I was in a more, like, military town that was, like, maybe just trying to push whatever was more easy and convenient to, like, get all these kids to do this shit, you know?
Maybe. Well, at least where I, like, there was no technology allowed, and now it's like, you know, she was telling me about how they were, like, issuing computers, and how they were like, you know, because she was like, oh, they tried issuing computers last year, and I was like, when you were 11, and she went, yeah, a lot of the kids broke. Not gonna do it this year.
I could see that too.
And I was
People
like,
just not respecting property that's not theirs.
yeah, and I could be like, oh, I could see them changing laws of like fining parents or stuff for things their kids do or stuff like that. But you know, I don't know. It's one of those things where if something does happen, you know, you're not allowed to if you do something illegal, and then it's not illegal until the law is ratified for it. So, sodomy still technically legal in Texas. So, if you're not doing missionary, you're going to jail.
I think in Texas too, there's something about like you can't own more than like 6 dildos or something.
That is true.
It's like, it's maybe not that exact number, but they did have a cap on it, and you were just
real.
like, what? Who is making? How the fuck do you even know how many people are buying what for them? You know,
like, a friend of mine has a collection, and they were telling me like I could get arrested for this, and I was like,
who's implementing it? But technically,
and I was like, why? And they told me that, and I was like, that's insane,
right?
And I was asking about it, and what was weird is I was like, what's the word? Marital aids, I think is like the like the old school term for a dildo. And I was like, is it just dildos or is it like all things?
Right.
And they were like, it's all things. And I was like,
but like, who did they find that had so many? They're like, yo, we gotta put like a cap on this, and why? You know?
I was like, I'm gonna go to the store and buy 7 pocket pussies.
Exactly.
Just because I'm a rebel.
No, literally. It's just so funny to just think about, again, the times for everything, and then like what it could have been like back in the day. Like, I know I would have been a witch burned at the stake. It would have been a thing. Yeah. And I'm glad that even though we have hard times now, I still am glad I am in this time. I was not built for any other time, because this one's hard. And so I can't imagine any other.
You know, not for nothing, I don't want to like go spouting stuff about myself. I feel as though I'm pretty empathetic.
Yeah, same.
You know, so whenever and I have a lot of friends, and I'm always like, you know, I am a straight white guy.
Right.
So I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty set.
Yeah.
As far as a lot of stuff goes, but I feel really bad for.
Of course. That's how you know you're a good person, because you actually care and feel bad. If you because you put yourself in that position of what that would have been like.
I was watching this thing from the DM that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Dungeon Master.
I was like, what's DM? Direct message.
Yeah, and he was talking about how they're trying to change base pay laws in California.
Okay.
You know how I guess like that's always been a forefront of thing there, of like changing the way base pay works for like service workers and jobs and stuff like that. And he was saying how he was having this debate about with someone he was talking to about these laws going forward, and he was like, man, he was like, and the guy was like, man, that's bullshit, you know, they shouldn't need to be paying these people like that. And he's just like, what?
Right.
He's like, do you, and then the guy he's like, do you not like sandwiches? What are you talking about? He's like, do you not like coffee or sandwiches? He's like, no, I like coffee. Like, have you ever bought a coffee or a sandwich? Yeah. He's like, all right, so the person who made you that coffee or sandwich doesn't have a right to healthcare or live comfortably or survive in life?
Yeah.
He was just like, you want them to suffer? And he's like, well, no. He's like, all right, that's the basis of the law. Sure. He's like, if you think other people should suffer and you're a piece of shit, then yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's like, and I think a lot of like goofy laws are things either made for specific purposes that someone paid for to deal with a very specific
Yeah.
issue, like collecting horse shit. Some of them are probably were like, we're gonna see if we can get it through as a joke.
Right, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, to like just see if we could,
Yeah.
and then they do. Because I know that's a thing where it's like you try to pass a law. I know there's a name for it, but you try to pass a law that like everyone with, but on a subsect of that is something that no one would agree with. You know, like an addendum that applies to something that you want to be illegal because it's a part of this law and it's has a
Right.
classified punishment.
Interesting.
You can justify.
Yeah.
What's the word? But I think a lot of it is just, how can we need to put laws into place to further kind of the oppression
Of course.
of people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of laws, you're right.
Right.
Be able to collect your own horse poop.
That part.
And a bunch of other stuff.
So, all in all, this just shows you guys, one, have some fun and dip into some crazy laws maybe in your state that you could technically break just for fun. Two, know your local laws and federal laws. See who you're voting for, especially locally. It makes a difference. And just be aware. That's all we can ask, okay?
A good point to know. Technically, ignorance is not an excuse in the eyes of the law if you break it, but it is for police officers. That's true. They don't have to know the law legally.
That's true.
You do.
That is very true. On that note, you stay safe. Thanks for coping with us.
Check us out on YouTube, Patreon, podcast services around the globe, social medias, including the Ticks, the Talks.
The Tickety Talks.
Are we on anything else?
Instagram.
Instagram. We're on Instagram.
Share us, like us, comment, all that free stuff, that engagement. Much needed, much appreciated.
Thank you for coping with us.
We'll see you next time when we do Scavenger's Reign. So if you haven't watched it,
Yeah,
you better
get in
watch
on
it.
that.
It's on HBO. Okay, bye.
Bye.